right, folks. Hi. I know we're all still filing in, but I just need to go ahead and get started so that we can maximize our time with Scott, Camil, and friends. I would like to welcome everybody on behalf of the Samuel Proctor Oral History program and the wonderful folks at Women's Studies who take care of this absolutely beautiful structure. So thank you, Women's Studies, very much for letting us use Esler Hall. I would also like to say that if you have extra credit or you need to sign in, you can do it at the end too. We'll have it then for you. And I know that a lot of you have to leave at about 1:40. So if that happens, that's fine. Just be quiet about it because everybody's doing their office hours right now. Also tonight, I need to plug this. We're having another event. It's at 6 o'clock and it's based in UF and Florida civil rights. Particularly about St. Augustine and people in Gainesville. It's going to be really great. We're going to have a lot of the civil rights activists that were involved in the 60s and 70s at that time. They're going to be answering questions and providing their perspective on where we are today. And there will also be performances by UF students based on the oral histories that the program has done. So we encourage you to come to that. That's at 6 o'clock in Pugh Hall. Which is just right across the way from here. Lastly, we have internship applications. This program that you're at right now was entirely created and run from the flyers to the PowerPoints to the venue by interns. So by 19 and 20-year-olds that are absolutely amazing, and they're standing to your right. Y'all see them? Y'all see them? All right. So if you'd like to become an intern too, we just put on our applications. Today's the very first day of the application process. So I'm going to turn it over to Miss Jeannie, wherever she is. Oh, just kidding. I'm going to turn it over to someone I don't know, and then Miss Jeannie's going to talk. Thank you so much.
Everyone, I'll keep this brief. My name is Megan and I'm a director with the Fund for the Public Interest. We're a national nonprofit group and we run grassroots campaigns across the country for the nation's top progressive nonprofit groups. We're on campus today and tomorrow conducting interviews for graduating seniors to be a part as our citizen outreach directors in some of our offices across the country. And so I'm here just to see if there's any graduating seniors who'd be interested in working on these campaigns. We also have summer jobs available for students who aren't graduating but are interested in these types of issues. It's too funny that this is what you guys are here speaking about, because the reason that I got into this work is because I would look through my history books and see pictures of Vietnam War protests, civil rights movement, women's suffrage, things of that nature, and thought, you know, this is so cool. I'm looking at pictures of everyday people, but they're my history books because they made a change. And so that's why I really got into this work. And since I've been working with the Fund for the Public Interest, I've really gotten to see myself get into the role of being able to be proactive and make changes in our country. So I have a sign-in sheet, or a sheet that if you just want to jot down like your name, cell phone number, so we can get in contact with you if this is something that you're interested in. I'll be over here when you guys are leaving, so you can feel free to sign up with me then. And also, I guess if some of you have to sneak out a little bit earlier, I'll stand over there when people need to get out. If this is something that you're interested in, please definitely jot down your contact info so we can reach out with you and possibly have a one-on-one interview later on this week. So thank you so much, and thank you for letting me plug this real quick, and enjoy.
All right, today we are very pleased to welcome Scott Camil, Vietnam veteran, political activist, and Veterans for Peace chair. Scott Camil voluntarily joined the Marine Corps straight out of high school. He served in the Marines from 1965 to 1969, spending 2 years in Vietnam. During his time in Vietnam, he attained the rank of sergeant and received 2 Purple Hearts after being wounded in action. He left the service with an honorable discharge and attended Miami-Dade College with the help of the GI Bill, where he earned a 2-year degree in pre-law. He then came to the University of Florida, where he attended a demonstration by Jane Fonda that changed his life. She emphasized that America was meant to be a democracy, led by the people, that the government was lying about Vietnam, and people needed to hear the truth. She called for veterans to come forth and tell their experiences of Vietnam. Motivated by Fonda's presentation, Camil went off to Detroit, where he testified in the Winter Soldier investigation, along with other veterans, all recounting their experiences in Vietnam. His attitude toward the war changed dramatically during this time, and he became devoted to the anti-war movement. The Vietnam Veterans Against the War, or VVAW, recruited Camil to represent the organization as a regional coordinator of Florida, Georgia, and Alabama. In 1972, Camil and the VVAW had planned a demonstration at the Republican National Convention in Miami Beach to protest against the war in Vietnam. Informants and undercover FBI agents had infiltrated the VVAW, and they claimed that the police planned an attack to disrupt the convention and blame it on the VVAW. Camil took it in his best interest to devise a plan strictly for self-defense. And 8 of the members of the VVAW, including Camil, were then indicted on charges of conspiracy to violently disrupt the convention, a case referred to as the Gainesville 8, and each represented themselves in court. Since the plans were riddled with the statement, for defensive purposes only, the jury found each of the 8 members not guilty. It was during this trial, Camil graduated from UF with a BA in philosophy. In 1974, Camil was targeted in an assassination attempt issued by J. Edgar Hoover, who wrote a memo claiming that Scott Camil was dangerous and must be neutralized. 2 undercover agents attacked Scott, shooting him in the back. Going to trial once again, he represented himself a second time, where his story of the attack matched the evidence, whereas the 2 agents who claimed that they were retaliating in self-defense and the gun went off accidentally did not. The jury found Scott not guilty and strongly recommended the indictment of the 2 agents for attempted murder, although no further action was taken against them. Scott Camil later joined the Veterans for Peace organization, accompanying fellow veterans on missions of aid to Central America and the Middle East, and started the Gainesville chapter of the Veterans for Peace. He is also chair in the Swanee St. John's Sierra Club. Today, he's going to share some of his documents from his trials, as well as his thoughts on patriotism, activism, and government spying. So let's welcome Scott Camil.
Thank you for such a nice, warm introduction. I want to thank everyone. Can you all hear me? I want to thank everyone for being here. I want to thank the University of Florida. I'd like to thank Louise. I want to thank Flo for being here, and the people from the oral history program. I voluntarily went to Vietnam. I served my country. I came home and I went to college. And while I was in college, I learned things that made me turn against the war in Vietnam. I became one of the organizers of Vietnam Veterans Against the War. The government targeted our organization. Until our organization was founded, what the government would say about the anti-war people were that they were people who didn't know what they were talking about, people who weren't willing to serve their country, people who were communist sympathizers. When we formed Vietnam Veterans Against the War, they couldn't say we didn't know what we were talking about. We were U.S. foreign policy. They couldn't say we weren't willing to serve our country. So they tried to discredit us in other ways. When I first formed Vietnam Veterans Against the War here in Gainesville, I started getting arrested. And in an 18-month period, in a 6-month period, I was arrested on 18 charges. I was facing the death penalty plus 120 years in prison. So the government started using everything available to them to try to discredit our organization and to try to get us off the street. When the government, the Democratic and Republican parties decided to have their conventions in 1972 in Miami Beach, that was part of Florida. I was the regional coordinator for Florida, Alabama, and Georgia. So planning for the event in Miami Beach and planning for the security became my job. We had lots of meetings, and I didn't know until the trial of the Gainesville 8 that a lot of these meetings, I was the only person at these meetings that was not an undercover agent. Our chapter of Vietnam Veterans Against the War here in Gainesville was infiltrated by over 12 different agencies. And those agencies did not coordinate with each other because they didn't trust each other. So I would be at a meeting and there would be 4 of us at the meeting. And person A would go back to his agency and say, Scott, Camil, and B and C are planning to do something bad. Person B would go back to his agency and say, Scott, Camil, and A and C are planning on doing something bad. And Agent C would do the same thing. So at the trial of the Gainesville 8, the agents chopped each other up when they were on the stand. I really have no understanding of why the prosecutor, knowing that these agents would contradict each other, would put the agents on the stand, or why they would do anything that they did, but they did. During the trial, we had 14 months of pretrial hearings, and then the trial lasted for 30 days. And Carol, will you stand up for a minute? That's Carol Gordon. She was on our defense committee. And Richard Hudgens. Richard was one of the 23 of us that were subpoenaed to the grand jury. Thank you. So right before the Democratic Convention started, 23 of us, all leaders of Vietnam Veterans Against the War, were subpoenaed to a grand jury. And that meant that we couldn't go to the convention because we were at the grand jury. And our lawyers filed motions. Actually, at first we had no lawyers, and then lawyers came and filed motions. How can the grand jury see 23 people at the same time? They wanted to stagger our appearances, but the government would not allow that to happen. Then the lawyer said, look, there's only a few of us. There's 23 people have been subpoenaed. We need more time. We need more lawyers. Otherwise, there would be a violation of the attorney-client privilege. We can't meet with all of these people as a group. So the judge ordered that the attorneys that were there meet with all of us as a group. So the attorneys wanted the judge to, the attorneys were concerned that some of the 23 of us might be undercover agents. And the attorneys wanted to get that clarified before the trial started, before the attorneys would work with all of us that were subpoenaed. So the judge put the prosecutor on the stand, and the prosecutor was asked one question. Are any of the 23 people here today represented by these attorneys undercover agents working for the federal government or any government agency? And the prosecutor said no. So with that assurance, the 23 of us worked together with the attorneys that were there. It turned out at the trial that 3 of the 23 were undercover agents. So we made a stink about the violation of the attorney-client relationship. And in court, this was during the hearings, the judge put the prosecutor on the stand. The prosecutor swore that he did not ask any questions of the undercover agents about the meetings that they attended with the lawyers. And each of those people also said that they did not disclose any information from the meetings with the lawyers that they attended. We felt that it was a violation of the attorney-client relationship just having the undercover agents meeting with us and the lawyers. That was one of the motions that we lost. During the trial, the first day of the trial, the first witness that was testified against me was my landlord. Turned out that he was an ex-Marine. I'm a Marine also. And he was a small arms expert who served in Korea. He testified that when he came to my house, that he saw 2 cases of machine guns in my attic. And I was being charged with possession of automatic weapons without a license. During the cross-examination, Larry Turner, who was one of the attorneys, pulled out this weapon and asked the expert, the small arms expert, if this is what one of the machine guns that was in the attic. And the expert said, yes, that was one of the machine guns in the attic. And then the lawyer went like that, and everybody in the courtroom started laughing, and the judge got very angry. Back in 1972, the M16 was a new weapon. So people who were soldiers who served in World War II or Korea wouldn't have known what one really looked like. And actually, they're bigger than this. They don't have blue, they're all black, but it turned out that the expert was also colorblind, and he couldn't tell that this was that blue and black. But this is marked Defense Exhibit 4. During the trial, a lot of interesting things happened. We had been given a room by the judge to meet with our attorneys and to discuss things when we had recesses to discuss things. So in one of these recesses, when we went in to have a conference with the lawyers, we were in this room across from the courtroom, and there was a door. And there was metal louvers on the bottom of the door. And someone thought they heard a noise, and they looked and they saw feet. So they right away went and got the marshals. So the US Marshals came, they unlocked the closet, and they caught 2 FBI agents with bugging equipment in the closet, in the room that the judge assigned us to work with our attorneys. We quickly had a hearing, and we were yelled at by the judge for making a mountain out of a molehill. The FBI agents said that they were concerned that we might be bugging the federal building, and they were there to keep an eye on us to make sure that we weren't bugging the federal building during the trial. And they got away with that. I represented myself in the trial because I felt that who cares about my safety more than me? Who knows more about what went on than me? So I decided to represent myself, and that also gave us a tactical advantage because when I would say things that the lawyers couldn't say because they weren't allowed to, the judge would admonish me, and then I would say, "I'm sorry, Your Honor, I just wanted the jury to know the truth." In the end, the jury found us all not guilty. And actually, it was much stronger than that. And I'll show you in a minute from this box. When you look at the headlines from the newspapers, New York Times, Los Angeles Times, Washington Post, Gainesville Sun, all over the country, the headlines of the paper were, "Gainesville 8 found innocent." You never see found innocent. You always see not guilty, because that's what the jury says, not guilty. But all the papers had it as found innocent. And the trial lasted 30 days. During that 30 days, the government put on 28 witnesses. After the government rested its case, it was our turn to put on the defense. We had a meeting, and it was decided at that meeting that the government had not proven its case, and therefore we should just rest. There were tactical reasons to do this. There were 8 defendants. We voted. The vote was 6-2. I was one of the 2 that wanted to put on a defense. We had spent 14 months doing a lot of research. We wanted to have our time on the center stage. We were activists. Our job are educators. And now we have the whole world looking at us. We have all the press. This is our opportunity to talk about free fire zones, search and destroy operations, body count, Agent Orange, all the kind of things that we thought the public should know about. The lawyers felt that tactically it would be better not to put on a defense. The way that the trial works is the government goes first. They have an opening statement. We have an opening statement. Then the prosecutors present their case. We get to cross-examine their witnesses, and then we get to present our case. If we did not present a case and just rested our case without putting on a defense, the end of the trial, tactics would change. At the end, the government gives its closing argument, the defense gives its closing argument, and then the government gets the last word. If the defense does not put on a defense, then the defense gives a closing argument, the government gives a closing argument, and then the defense has the last word. The lawyers wanted to have the last word. And also, any witnesses that the prosecution might have been holding back, they wouldn't get to use because we had no defense, so there would be no rebuttal. So the vote was 6-2, and we didn't put on a defense. In less than 4 hours, the jury came back and found us not guilty. The judge asked that everybody stay in their seats. He asked the jury if this is true what they said, and they all said yes. And then he said, everybody stay in the seats and the jury could leave. And the jury didn't want to leave, so the judge ended the case. The jurors got up, they came over to our table where we were, and we all had tears in our eyes, they had tears in their eyes, and everybody was hugging. Over at the other table, where the FBI was, and the prosecutors, they were like this. They couldn't figure it out. They just didn't understand why the jury related to us, and there was so much warmth over at our table. I'm really thankful to that jury. And I really, when the trial was over, I really thought about how the trial affected us, how much of my time was tied up in court, all the dirty tricks they did to us. And because we were found not guilty, all of the things that they did to us, we weren't allowed to go into court and further argue because they were moot. Since we were found not guilty, obviously all those dirty tricks that they did didn't hurt us. So we were not able to go after them in that sense. Over the years, all I really thought about was how dirty the government was and the things that they did to us and how they got away with it. I thought about us, and I thought about our witnesses, and I thought about the politics of it, but I didn't really think about the jury. I was really self-centered in my thoughts. We had a reunion just recently in August. In August was the 40th anniversary of the jury finding us innocent. And so at the reunion, many people came. You can look at the back of this shirt. You can see that several of the defendants are deceased now. The foreperson of the jury, Lois Hensel, is deceased, and some of the lawyers are deceased. At the reunion, it turned out that there's a lot of stuff that we don't remember. As we get older, our memory fades away. One of the things that was a question that was asked at the reunion was, how did the Center for Constitutional Rights get involved in the trial? They were lawyers from New York, Center for Constitutional Rights. They flew down to Florida. They came to Tallahassee. They helped us at the grand jury. They were experts on the grand jury. Even the lawyer that came to the reunion from the Center for Constitutional Rights did not know how they got involved with the case. So it became apparent to me, I'd been working with Paul and the oral history program on oral histories of veterans. And it became really apparent to me that we needed to get our histories before we all died, because general history is the system's history, the government's history, the 1%'s history, if you will. A people's history, something like Howard Zinn's book, that's the kind of history that I like. And that's the kind of history that gets recorded in oral histories here at the University of Florida. So we got Paul in the oral history department to come and do oral histories of the defendants and the lawyers and other people who were involved in the Gainesville 8 case. At the reunion, Jim Hensel came, and his wife Lois was the foreperson of the jury. And he brought this box. And it says G8 on the top. I didn't know that this box existed. And when I opened the box up, it was files on the trial. His wife, who's now deceased, Lois, and he kept a daily file on what went on at the trial. Personal notes from her each day, what she thought of witnesses, what they said, just tons of stuff, really well organized. So much history, just an enormous amount of history. And we started looking through the files, and we couldn't believe how much stuff was in here. I want to share a few of the things that was in here. This was the same time as Watergate. And Watergate was a time when Nixon people got found breaking into Democratic headquarters and dirty tricks and dirty money. And so Watergate was the hotel that was broken into. That was the name of this big thing that happened. And so at the trial, the jury was sequestered. That meant that the jury had to be locked in hotel rooms. And for the 30 days, they were never allowed to be alone with anyone. They were never allowed to speak to anyone alone. So if a husband called the wife, a federal marshal monitored. If a wife came to visit a husband in the room, a federal marshal sat there with them. So they had no privacy and everything was monitored that they did. And the judge ordered that the jury not be allowed to have anything that put the US government in a negative light. So the headlines of the newspaper every day was about Watergate. So in the daily papers that the jury got, the federal marshals had to censor the papers first. This is a front page of the Gainesville Sun, August 21st, 1973. And this is the kind of newspaper, whoops, that's very bad, that the jurors got each day. We were never able to see these. We didn't know what the jurors got. And if it wouldn't have been for this box that was left to us by Jim and Lois Hensel, we wouldn't know this information. This box is going to be donated to the University of Florida Library Department in association with the Oral History Program. Jim Hensel has agreed to donate this. The University of Florida Library is going to host the Gainesville 8 collection. This is the first box in the collection. Jim and Lois Hensel were high school sweethearts. They never dated anyone else. They got married, and they never spent a day apart their whole time of their marriage until the trial. And that was the first time that they were apart, and they were apart for 30 days. And this took a huge psychological toll on that family. I wouldn't have known about that without these files. In these files are letters that Jim Hensel wrote to the judge, asking that he allow the families to be together. They had to give Lois medicine for depression because she was so depressed because being split apart from her family. The judge said there was too much publicity, so they had to stay sequestered and couldn't be with their families. So James Hensel started keeping a chart, and he made graphs of how many words were in each article each day about the Gainesville 8 trial, and he sent those graphs to the judge to try to get the judge to relent and let his family be together. None of that information I would know anything about. And Lois was only one juror, and it showed me how selfish I'd been in my thoughts about all this terrible stuff that happened to us, and I didn't really ever think about other people that were affected. So I apologized for that, and I feel my heart goes out to the juries and to their families, and I'm so happy that we have this box, that we've learned this personal story, that this is going to the University of Florida. The last thing I want to say about this box is This folder is court material, and it has a copy of the Constitution that the judge gave the jurors. It's got a certificate of appreciation that the judge gave the jurors. It's got a bunch of information like that. But the one thing that I found really interesting was when the jury went in to decide whether we were guilty or innocent, they got 2 packs of papers like this. And each pack of paper had 8 papers in it. And each paper has a name on it. So this says, we, the grand jury, find the defendant, Scott Camil, guilty of the offenses as charged in count 1 in the indictment. These were the guilty ones for each of us. And if Lois would have signed this one, we all would have went to prison. But she signed the ones that said not guilty, and so we're not in prison and we're free. And so this was the first time I got to look at this document that would have put us in prison had she signed it. Now, a lot of you came here because you're in Louise's class and you've had a lot of documents to read. You've seen the film on the Gainesville 8. So what I really want to do now is I want to open up to questions, because I really find that at these talks that the best stuff comes out at the questions. So can I have some questions?
Scott, did you ever consider after the trial was over and you were declared not guilty of suing the prosecution because of malicious prosecution?
The question was, did we think about suing the government in the Gainesville 8 case? And we did. But you need 2 things. First of all, you need permission from the government to sue them. You really do. And we didn't have permission from the government. And we didn't have any standing because we were found not guilty. So we did try to sue them. And actually, the part about the 3 undercover agents being in the meetings with our lawyers went to the Supreme Court. And we lost that on the grounds that everyone testified that the agents testified that they did not pass any of that information on. So by being found not guilty, that wiped out our chance to sue them.
While the prosecution was presenting its case, did your lawyer cross-examine any of their witnesses? And when the jury spoke their verdict, did the foreman actually speak the word innocent? And did any of your group manage to continue connection with the movement during the trial and totally taken off the scene?
Okay, let me see if I can get them. Give them to me again one at a time.
Okay, first, did your lawyers cross-examine them?
Yes, and because I represented myself, I got to cross-examine witnesses. So it was a lot of fun for me. So of course, that's one of the ways that the jury found us not guilty. As to whether they said innocent or not guilty, I don't remember. I haven't the slightest idea in the world. But it was our cross-examination of those witnesses that just chewed them up, spit them out. What was your last question?
The last one, did you manage to stay connected with the movement? They take you totally off the stage?
I think that the 8 of us were totally focused on the trial, even though that we were leaders of Vietnam veterans against the war. Whenever we went somewhere to speak, we spoke about the trial and we spoke about the repression and all of the dirty tricks they did, like listening on our phones, looking at our mail, all of the stuff that we did. But let me say, we had a lot more privacy then than we have today. Today, they don't have to sneak around and do it. They're doing it wholesale. They're looking at your emails, they're looking at everything. You have no privacy, you have no secrets. You know, so we were really upset at them violating us back then, but compared to today, what they did to us was nothing compared to what they're doing to people today. Questions?
I'm just making an observation. When you were going through your entering, volunteering for the military, was there a draft?
There was a draft.
Obviously, there's no draft now, so it seems like a dead issue. But by and large, were young people pretty concerned then? because of the draft?
I think that's the great big difference between what goes on today and what went on then. Because of the draft, every family that had a son between the ages of, let's say, 17 and 23 had to worry about that person being drafted and sent to war. So because those families were directly affected, they got up and they fought against the war. We had huge demonstrations against the war in Vietnam. And that's because people had something at stake. At the time that this was going on, when I came back from Vietnam, I became a counselor for Central Committee for Conscientious Objectors. And I was against the draft. And people said to me, Scott, you're being really short-sighted. The draft is good. If we get rid of the draft, we'll have an all-volunteer army. And then the government will be able to do whatever it wants, and there won't be any public opposition because they're all volunteers. I didn't believe them. Well, they were right. I'm wrong. So I was against the draft because the Constitution says there shall be no involuntary servitude or slavery within the United States. The draft is involuntary servitude. So I thought it was unconstitutional. But today, our government commits crimes, war crimes, all over the planet. We don't have much opposition in this country because all of that burden is on very few families. There's no taxes for the war. The overwhelming majority of American citizens don't even know someone serving in Iraq or Afghanistan. So by getting rid of the draft, the government was able to really wipe out opposition to its imperialism. Questions? Susan?
Was there a noticeable attitude towards you from the local community once you were released?
We had really strong community support the whole time. I guess when the community support really gelled, in May of '72, our government mined Haiphong Harbor. And so we decided to have a demonstration and block University Avenue and 13th Street. And we wanted to inconvenience the public, to let them see what an inconvenience was about. We felt that the mining of the Haiphong Harbor was an escalation. We felt if a Russian ship would hit one of those mines, the war would get much bigger. So we were against it. The May demonstrations of '72 became known as the Gainesville riots, the May riots of 1972. And we blocked University Avenue and 13th Street for 2.5 days. And I think about 400 students were arrested. Eventually, they were all acquitted, except for one student who was charged with a felony. And I think 18 police officers were hospitalized and 54 were treated on the scene. And they were used to, at this time period, beating up demonstrators. But we were veterans, and we were a little bit different, and we weren't turn your cheek kind of people. So we defended ourselves, and the government overreacted. And because there was pictures in the paper and on the news of the police committing crimes against the public, beating people up. So they went after the press, and they beat up the newsmen, they took the film out of their cameras, they smashed their cameras. Once they did that, all of a sudden the press was on our side. And from that point on, from the May riots on, we had really, we were really supported. Buddy Davis, Pulitzer Prizing editorial writer, was the editor of the Gainesville Sun, and they had great editorials against the war, against government conduct, against what was going on in Watergate. So I think that Watergate and the May riots helped open people's eyes up to the abuses of the government.
Have you ever gotten in contact with any of the undercover agents or anything, and hear their side of the story or anything like that?
Yes, the question was, had I had any contact with any of the undercover agents? And it turns out that I did have contact with one of the other undercover agents. Probably about 20 years later, he called me up. How many of you saw the film Protest Story of the Gainesville 8? The guy that was in dark, who was the undercover agent, he called me up. And he told me that he was originally assigned to assassinate me, and that he was given a 22 caliber pistol with a silencer on it, and he was supposed to draw up plans to do that. And I was taking the phone call, and he didn't know I was taking the phone call. And he told me the person who, the FBI agent in charge who gave him the gun and assigned him the job to assassinate me. And my mind has gone blank. I can't think of his name right now. Joe, do you remember? We wrote an article, we put it in the Gainesville Sun, we had the tape recording, and this guy was the #1, he worked for Steve Ulrich, and he helped run the Alachua County Sheriff's Department. He retired from the FBI, and he was here working locally, so we published an article, and the undercover agent called me back and said, now they're really gonna kill you, they're really pissed at you now. So that was the only contact I had with an undercover agent. Whitney.
Were there in the early days of the Veterans for Peace, women also veterans involved in that organization?
There were some in VBAW, and we have some in Veterans for Peace. They're two different organizations, but back then it was Vietnam Veterans Against the War. And we did have some women veterans, but we didn't have any women veterans in Gainesville. And actually, when I was in Vietnam, I didn't see any women. I didn't see any what we called round-eye women. Round-eye women. Right. Oriental people have slanted eyes, so we referred to American women as round-eye women. Question?
What was your reaction to discover that a pop song had been written at that year?
Say that one more time.
What was your reaction to discover that a song had been written that year?
Well, one day I got a call from a friend of mine with Vietnam Veterans Against the War in San Francisco, and he said, you need to come out here to California. This was during the pre-trial hearings time, and I went out there, and he took me over to Joan Baez's house, and she wanted to meet me, and on the back of her album, Come From the Shadows, she has a poem about me. But she saw the film Winter Soldier, which I'm one of the primary people in that film, and it motivated her to write this poem, and she wanted to meet me. After I was shot in the assassination attempt by the federal agents, she sent me $10,000 to help me raise money, seed money, for my defense. At the same time, I then went over to Graham Nash's house, and we smoked a joint and sat on the floor, and he sang me this song, and I was really blown away by it. That's all I can really tell you. My mother didn't like the song, though.
I just wanted to point something out, Scott. Because I was around during those times too, the student government president at the University of Florida, during that time when the National Guard came out and so on, he called for the students to have a general strike. It was a student government president. I'm not sure you elected the kind of student government president that would call for a general strike to oppose the Vietnam War, and it was the invasion of Cambodia. I think that was the reaction to, if you've heard of Kent State. But we had here in Gainesville the National Guard patrolling our campus. I'm just wondering how many young people really even know that even happened.
Well, I don't know that, but what I do know is that I think we had about 20,000 students at the time. And I think there's about 50,000 students now. And when we had demonstrations against the war, we had 3,000 people out in the street, and they were students. Where's today's students? I don't know. They're not out in the street. They're not doing anything about the 1%.
From your story here, it seems like there was a really tremendous reaction to this war, but actually the majority were basically for it, and that continues today with Iran and Afghanistan. And I was just wondering, what is propaganda or whatever, why do we accept this?
Well, I can't tell you why Americans accept it. I think that you're incorrect about the first part. I think that in the end, the majority of American citizens opposed the war in Vietnam. And in this war, I would say the majority of American citizens don't even think about the war. They really think about how they're going to be paying their bills.
Scott, as you know, the Gainesville 8 was not the only federal prosecution at that time. So can you tell us something more about the other prosecutions?
There were a number of them. There was the Seattle 8, the Chicago 7, the Camden 28, the Berrigans. What's interesting about them, the same prosecutor from Washington, from the Internal Security Department of the Justice Department, the Special Litigation Section, named Guy Goodwin. He went around the country, and it was his job to get indictments against leaders of the anti-war movement. He got 103 indictments around the country, no convictions. Now, some people will argue with me and say there were some convictions in the Chicago 7 case, but they were overturned. So I would say no convictions. The government used its mighty power to divert our time, our energy, and our money to get us out of the street and to put us in the courtroom, to put us in jail. When we went before the judge, when we first got charged at the grand jury with the crimes, we pled guilty to crimes against the people of Indochina, not guilty to these charges. The judge said that he was a B-52 pilot in World War II and that the United States doesn't commit war crimes, and if he thought we really did commit war crimes, he would add that to the charges against us. The court system was used in every way possible against leaders of the anti-war movement to try to intimidate us, to keep us in jail so we couldn't be in the street, to diminish our support, to keep us busy and tied up. For me, every time I got arrested, it was positive reinforcement. When you're working against the war, you work 1 year, you work another year. Also, I've been working against Iraq and Afghanistan for a very long time. There's not a lot of positive reinforcement. So to me, every time the government came to arrest me for something, I felt I'm doing a good job. Because if I wasn't doing a good job, they wouldn't be trying to shut me up. So every time they arrested me, it gave me more energy. So I know it's time for, the class is over, so that class is leaving. If other people want to ask questions, I'm happy to take more questions. Thank you. Hey, Flo, can you come up here? So I want to put this stuff back in the box.
Yeah.
And I'm happy to give you this box.
Right.
I don't have the form signed yet.
That's cool. That's fine.
Also, am I going to be able to give you stuff like this?
Yeah, sure. That's great.
Defense number 4.
All right. Yeah. No, we'll find a box for that.
Okay. Hi.
Say thank you, and I really admire you. I'm a political science major. That's why you're here. It's very interesting to learn about. I've never heard anything about this before. So really, I admire you a lot. I think what you do is very
Okay,
great.
thank you. Well, y'all have as much opportunity to work for peace and justice as I did.
I will.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Say again?
Don't worry about signing.
Well, I have it too, but any normal person that goes to war is going to have it. But you really need to thank the oral history department and the VIDS for saying this. Everyone's responsible. Sure.
You were posing for me.
I was posing.
Hey. I want to turn around on my time.
The box. Oh yeah. This is Cornelius Clayton. Mr. Clayton. Photographer.
This
Here,
box.
take a picture. This is.
You stay in there too.
This.
Yeah.
No.
Get Scott in here.
Here, hold it up.
Okay. You hold this up.
No, you didn't.
Wait.
Oh, picture the box.
Yeah, the
box, yeah. Don't hold that on M16 on me now. I had that in Vietnam.
That's a pretty small M16, and it's pretty light too. Somebody was really.
Anybody can see that.
Yeah, that's the gun.
Do some serious damage with that.
Okay, so today I'm going to present the first item of the Gainesville 8 collection. This is the Lois and James Hensel information files. Lois was the foreperson of the jury. She kept a daily file of what went on during the trial, her and her husband. So these are their personal files, and it's the first part of the Gainesville 8 collection, and today I'm presenting it to Flo from the library.
Thank you very much, Scott. The library, I'm delighted to accept this gift on behalf of the libraries. It's going to be housed in the Special and Area Studies Collection Department in Library East, where we will archive the materials and make them available for generations to come. And we're delighted to get this seed collection and look forward to other accessions for the Gainesville 8 collections. Thank you.
And I'm also giving her the first item like this. This was Defense Exhibit 4, and it was one of the machine guns that was in my attic that had me be charged with possession of machine guns.
Please don't point that at me.
Okay, thank you. I'm really happy that the University of
great.
Florida is doing this. This is Gainesville. This is the place the collection should be, and I'm really thankful to Flo and Paul Ortiz.
And thank you to you, Scott, for being the intermediary for these materials to come to the University of Florida.
Thank you.
That's good.